Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really pressing issue, the increasing dangers online influencers face, especially women and, marginalized individuals.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about arguments online. We're talking threats that are more and more spilling over into the real world.
Absolutely, with tragic consequences sometimes.
Exactly. And the recent case involving the Mexican influencer Valeria Márquez. Well, it's a really stark illustration of this.
It really is. And to sort of get under the skin of this, we've looked at quite a range of material.
Okay.
We've got news reports on the Márquez case itself, some really crucial guidelines from UN Women about building safer digital spaces.
Right.
There's a UNFPA tip sheet, too, specifically for journalists who are covering digital violence.
Useful.
Definitely. And findings from a Pew Research Center study on online harassment trends, and even some, pretty telling discussions from influencers themselves on Reddit.
Okay, quite a mix then. So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to dissect how serious and widespread these dangers actually are. We want to understand the root causes, look at effective ways to maybe prevent this violence, and, figure out where accountability needs to lie.
Right. Giving you, the listener, a clear picture.
Exactly. A comprehensive but hopefully digestible overview. Okay, so let's start by digging into this term. Digital gender-based violence. What are we actually talking about here?
Well, at its core, technology-facilitated gender-based violence, or TFGBV as it's sometimes called.
TFGBV, right.
It's violence that's really fueled by existing gender inequalities, harmful social norms that already exist.
Okay, so the roots are offline.
Exactly. What makes it distinct is that digital technologies are the tools used to carry it out, or amplify its impact.
Ah, I see. So the prejudice isn't new, but the tools are.
Precisely. The digital world just gives it new avenues and, frankly, expands the reach significantly.
Right. And it seems like it's not just one single type of behavior. There's a whole range of ways this stuff manifests online, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's really a spectrum of harmful actions. Think about things like cyberbullying, deliberate, repeated targeting.
Okay.
And general online harassment, the sort of inflammatory, discriminatory stuff we see in hate speech. Then there's the really personal threat of doxing, revealing someone's private information online.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And non-consensual sharing of intimate images, what we often call trolling, that disruptive, often malicious activity.
Right.
And even increasingly sophisticated manipulation through things like deepfakes.
Wow, okay.
We also see persistent cyberstalking, broader forms of image-based abuse, the targeted spread of gender disinformation specifically designed to silence women.
Okay, so using false info.
Yeah, and blackmail, various forms of online exploitation. It's a complex and constantly evolving landscape of abuse, unfortunately.
That is quite a list. It really makes you wonder just how pervasive this actually is. Do we have a sense of the scale, globally?
Sadly, yes, and it's alarmingly widespread. Global research suggests that anywhere from 16% up to, over half, 58% of women and girls have been targeted by online violence. 16
to 58%, that's a huge range. But even the low end is concerning.
It really is. And the prevalence varies quite a bit by region, too. For instance, a UN Women study in the Arab states back in 2021 found that a staggering 60% of women internet users experienced online violence just that year.
60% in 1 year. Wow.
Yeah. And then you have findings from a European study indicating women are 27 times more likely to face online harassment compared to men.
27 times. That just,
right.
It really puts the disparity into sharp focus, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. These numbers really hammer home that this isn't some marginal issue. It's a significant society-wide problem.
And as UN Women noted, the methods might be new, but the underlying motivations aren't. Which makes you think, who's being most affected by this shift online? It can't impact everyone equally, surely.
No, you've hit on a really crucial point there. Pretty much anyone online can experience some kind of negativity.
Yeah.
The data just consistently shows that women, girls, and gender nonconforming individuals are disproportionately targeted.
Okay.
And they tend to suffer more severe, more long-lasting consequences, specifically because of their gender. The online space, it often mirrors and even amplifies existing societal inequalities.
And within that broad group, women, girls, gender nonconforming people, are there specific communities facing even greater risks?
Yes, the data paints a pretty clear picture of heightened vulnerability for certain groups. Young women and girls are particularly at risk. Many report their first experiences of online harassment between like 14 and 16 years old.
So starting really young.
Really young. We also see significantly higher rates among LGBTIQ plus individuals, women with disabilities, and women from racialized, minoritized, and migrant communities.
Right.
And the UNFPA also stresses that individuals who hold multiple marginalized identities, say a woman of color who is also part of the LGBTIQ plus community, often face a kind of compounding effect.
So the risks stack up.
Exactly, leading to even greater risks and more severe forms of violence.
The Pew Research data you mentioned really underscores that disparity, too. I remember seeing women were way more likely to report sexual harassment and stalking online compared to men.
That's right. Their 2021 findings showed 16% of women reported online sexual harassment. Only 5% of men did.
Big difference.
Huge. Similarly, 13% of women reported online stalking versus 9% of men. And what's particularly concerning, I think, is the study also found that a third, 33% of women under 35, have experienced online sexual harassment.
A third of young women. That's shocking.
It is. And as you touched on, lesbian, gay, or bisexual adults are notably more likely to face various forms of harassment online, too.
It really paints a stark picture of who's bearing the brunt of this abuse. Okay, so we're seeing these different forms of digital gender-based violence on the rise, and it's clear women and marginalized groups are hit hardest. But what does this actually mean, in the real world? What are the tangible consequences beyond just the screen?
Well, the impact definitely extends far beyond the digital realm. Online violence has a really profound negative effect on women's ability to speak out, to participate fully in public life.
How so?
Research shows, for example, that a large percentage of women journalists, I think it's around 73% in one study, experience online violence.
Wow.
And for many, it led them to self-censor or, reduce their online presence significantly. So they just pull back.
Right, so it discourages participation.
Exactly. Similarly, studies on women parliamentarians, for instance, in Africa, found nearly half, 46%, subjected to relentless online sexist attacks. The aim is often to undermine their authority and just discourage their engagement altogether.
So a major consequence is literally silencing women's voices in important public conversations.
That's a huge part of it.
And I can only imagine the psychological impact. Dealing with constant online abuse must be incredibly draining.
Oh, the psychological toll can be absolutely devastating. Survivors often experience significant stigma, damage to their reputations, both personal and professional, and a direct hit on their productivity.
Mm-hmm.
The negative mental health effects are really serious, often leading to anxiety, depression, feelings of isolation, both online and offline. It just erodes their sense of safety and well-being.
But the sources also make a really disturbing connection between this online stuff and actual physical harm in the real world, don't they?
Tragically, yes. The UNFPA explicitly points out that digital violence can and does escalate into real-world violence.
Like what kind of violence?
Including things like street harassment, physical assault, sexual assault, and in the most extreme and heartbreaking cases, even femicide and assassinations.
Femicide, wow.
And this brings us, unfortunately, to the incredibly disturbing case of Valeria Márquez.
Valeria Márquez, yeah. A young, successful beauty influencer in Mexico. Her story really brought home the potential deadly consequences of these online dangers, didn't it?
It really did. It put it right in the spotlight.
Can you just remind us of the key details?
Sure. Valeria was just 23 years old. She'd built a significant following on TikTok and Instagram.
Right.
On May 13th, 2025, she was live streaming, actually, from her beauty salon in Zapopan, Jalisco.
Wow, live streaming.
Yes, when she was brutally shot and killed. The fact it happened while she was actively engaging with her audience online just highlights how blurred those lines between digital and physical life can become.
Yeah, and the initial investigation is looking at this as a potential femicide, right? Which, sadly, isn't that uncommon in that region.
Exactly. Given the alarmingly high rates of gender-based violence in Latin America generally, and particularly in Mexico. I mean, around 10 women and girls are murdered there every single day.
10 a day.
It's horrific. It results in one of the highest femicide rates in the region.
Mm-hmm.
So investigators are absolutely right to consider this as potentially gender-related violence.
And there were some really chilling details just before the shooting happened, weren't there? Something about a gift.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. Just moments before the attack, Valeria was actually talking about an expensive gift. Apparently, a friend named Vivian De La Torre had arranged it for her.
Okay.
She mentioned the delivery person had been told to wait because the item was supposedly so valuable. And then, in a really unsettling detail, she made some kind of fleeting comment about the possibility of being killed.
She said that just before.
Yeah, though the exact context and her tone, it's hard to be certain from the fragmented reports, obviously, but the comment was reported.
That's incredibly eerie. And the investigation has identified a couple of potential suspects, including this friend.
That's the current status, yes. Authorities are reportedly investigating Vivian de la Torre, the friend connected to the gift, and also Valeria's partner, Ricardo Ruiz Velasco.
Okay.
He's apparently known by aliases like RR or El Tripa, and some reports have also linked him to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the CJNG.
Ah, the cartel connection. That adds a whole other layer of potential danger and complexity, doesn't it, given their presence there and the high homicide rates generally?
It certainly does. Now, law enforcement has stated there's no definitive link to cartel violence at this stage.
Right.
But the broader context of organized crime in that region, well, it can't be dismissed. The mayor of Zapopan did publicly condemn the killing as a femicide and also noted his office hadn't received any prior reports of threats from Valeria.
It's just a truly tragic and horrifying case. It really hammers home the lethal potential, the dangers faced by women with a public online presence, especially in places already dealing with high levels of gender-based violence. It makes you think, how incredibly difficult must it be to even start tackling this kind of digital violence when the real-world stakes can be literally life and death?
You've really highlighted a core challenge there. Digital violence has these unique characteristics that make it incredibly tough to address.
Like what?
Well, its speed and scale are just unprecedented. Harmful content can spread virally, globally, in seconds. That makes prevention and containment incredibly complex.
Right, it moves too fast.
Exactly. And the borderless nature of the internet also creates significant jurisdictional problems. Who prosecutes? Where?
And the technology itself is always changing, isn't it? New platforms, new features pop up all the time, often way faster than any regulations can keep up.
Precisely. Many of these newer digital technologies are basically operating in largely unregulated spaces.
A bit like the Wild West sometimes.
Sort of, yeah. This lack of clear legal frameworks and, frankly, consistent platform policies creates a breeding ground for misuse. It makes it much harder to hold perpetrators and the platforms themselves accountable.
And public opinion seems pretty critical of how the big social media companies are handling all this harassment. There's a real sense they could and probably should be doing more.
Yes, that Pew Research data indicated a really significant majority. 79% of Americans believe social media companies are doing only a fair or even poor job when it comes to dealing with online harassment and bullying.
79%, that's huge dissatisfaction.
It suggests widespread unhappiness with current moderation practices and how platforms respond, or maybe fail to respond.
Yet there seems to be a real debate about whether making these platforms legally liable is the right way to go. I remember seeing that only a minority actually supported lawsuits against them.
That's an important nuance, yeah. The same Pew study found only about a third of Americans believe individuals who've been harassed online should have the right to sue the platforms where it happened.
Only a third. Why so low, do you think?
Well, it highlights the complex tensions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between principles of free speech, the responsibilities platforms have, and figuring out where exactly the legal line should be drawn when it comes to online harm. It's not straightforward.
No, definitely not. So given these huge challenges, the speed, the scale, the lack of regulation, this whole debate around accountability, what concrete strategies are actually being explored or implemented to prevent digital violence and hold people responsible, it can't be totally unsolvable.
No, absolutely not. And there are numerous efforts underway. One really crucial area is actively involving young people.
How so?
Getting them involved in identifying solutions, raising awareness about TFGBV. UN Women, for example, has specific initiatives in Asia Pacific and Africa that work directly with youth.
Okay.
They help them develop tools, campaigns, recommendations for preventing and addressing the issue right within their own communities.
That makes a lot of sense. Empowering the next generation to be part of this solution creates safer online spaces themselves. What about the tech companies? What role can they play? The platforms themselves?
Well, there's definitely increasing pressure for greater accountability from them, the online service providers. This includes thinking proactively about mitigating the potential for misuse against women and girls right from the design stage, when they're developing platforms and features.
So building safety in from the start.
absolutely critical. And beyond that, increasing the representation of women within the tech sector itself is seen as vital.
Why is that important?
Well, women are still significantly underrepresented in fields like engineering, AI development, other key tech roles, and that lack of diversity can limit the perspectives that shape the technologies we all use every day.
Right. Different perspectives might spot potential harms earlier.
Potentially, yes.
And what about like broader public awareness campaigns and support for people who've actually experienced this?
Yeah, digital campaigns are playing an increasingly important role, both in raising awareness and fostering solidarity. Initiatives like UN Women's Fireflies campaign aim to build international support networks for those affected.
Okay, creating community.
Exactly. And they also use engaging formats like videos, animations. UN Women had one called Amira to educate the public about the different forms of online violence and how to respond effectively and safely. And multi-sectoral partnerships are also essential. Things like UN Women's Generation Equality Initiative or the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Online Harassment and Abuse.
What do they do?
They bring together governments, civil society organizations, the private sector, everyone, to collaborate on developing effective policies and practical solutions together.
That sounds crucial, getting everyone pulling in the same direction. The media also has a really important role here, don't they, in how these issues are understood?
Absolutely critical. That UNFPA tip sheet for journalists we mentioned, it provides really crucial ethical and practical guidelines.
Like,
It emphasizes framing digital violence as a fundamental violation of human rights, not minimizing it.
okay.
Avoiding any language that blames survivors, which is so important. Holding powerful actors, tech companies, governments accountable, using respectful, accurate language, and focusing on potential solutions, not just sensationalizing the harm.
Good points. And it also warns against amplifying hate speech or re-traumatizing survivors accidentally.
Exactly. Responsible reporting is key.
This is all incredibly important work, and it kind of brings us back full circle to the specific vulnerabilities faced by online influencers who, by the very nature of their work, have this very public presence and rely on that online engagement. The Reddit discussion you looked at offered some really insightful perspectives on their unique challenges.
Yes, it really did.
Yeah.
Beyond the sort of general online harassment we've discussed, influencers on Reddit highlighted some distinct risks they face.
Such as?
Things like persistent stalking, and sometimes even with relatively smaller followings, not just the huge names. The creation of dedicated hate accounts just focused on tearing them down. Coordinated attacks designed specifically to silence or discredit them.
Wow.
And because their work often involves sharing parts of their personal lives, sometimes accidentally revealing details about their location or routines.
They become more vulnerable.
Exactly. More vulnerable to real-world threats. And there are also these growing concerns about AI misuse.
How so?
Creating non-consensual content using their likeness or using their image for unauthorized promotions, things that can really damage their reputation and their livelihood.
And tragically, Valeria Márquez's case just underscores the most extreme potential consequence of all these online dangers for influencers, doesn't it?
It's the starkest example imaginable.
The Reddit users even shared personal experiences, didn't they? Dealing with stalkers, the constant barrage of online hate. It sounds exhausting.
It does. They highlighted the emotional toll it takes, the constant pressure to maintain engagement, the blurring of personal and public boundaries, the relentless exposure to negativity. It can take a significant toll on mental well-being. And that's on top of the very real fear of physical harm that some experience. It's a demanding and sometimes really precarious position to be in, trying to connect with an audience while staying safe.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, it's really crystal clear that digital violence, especially this technology-facilitated gender-based violence, it's not some abstract problem just floating around on the internet.
No, definitely not.
It's a serious, pervasive societal issue with devastating real-world consequences, especially for women and those with marginalized identities. And the heartbreaking case of Valeria Márquez is just, well, it's a stark and tragic reminder of that reality.
Absolutely. And addressing it really requires a comprehensive, multifaceted approach. Individual awareness, responsible online behavior that's important, but it's not enough on its own.
Right, it needs more.
We need to see much greater accountability from the online platforms where this violence often starts and spreads. We need legal frameworks, enforcement mechanisms that are actually fit for the digital age, that recognize the serious harm TFGBV causes. And fundamentally, I think we need a broader societal shift, one that recognizes digital safety not as some kind of luxury, but as a fundamental aspect of human rights in our increasingly interconnected world.
This has been a sobering, but I think absolutely vital discussion, and it leaves me with a final thought for you, our listener. As our online and offline lives become more and more intertwined, seemingly every day, how can we collectively work towards creating digital spaces that aren't just vibrant and engaging, but are also fundamentally safe and equitable and free from violence for everyone?
It's a huge question.
It is, and it's one that really demands our urgent attention and our collective action.